So, okay. So I was talking about list, how to work with the list. And I said about indexing, right? Indexing and slicing. Now I said in the slicing, you can define the start value and stop value, and one more is what? Step value. So if you want to read more than one value, then you try to use which one? Slicing. Okay. So all these are optional, I said. Start index, stop index, and one more is what? Step index. Yes. See, the slicing also done. The slicing, the slicing also you can do it by using which object here? Slice object. Okay. You can do the slicing using a slice object. But what is the difference between your slice operator and slice object? You can also do the slicing using the slice object here. But what is the difference is? See, slice object is reusable. Slice object is reusable. The slice object can be used to slice number of sequences. It means if you want to apply the same slicing on more than one sequence, if you want to apply the same slicing on more than one sequence, you can apply the same slicing on more than one sequence. Okay, so you can apply the same slice object to more than one by using which one here? Slice object. So slice object is what here? Reusable. Okay, so it means, for example, the syntax of slice, creating slice object is, you'll say slice and it followed by start, stop, and it followed by a step, and the default step is +1. So the default step is +1, and if the step is positive, same rule. If step is positive, the start must be less than what here? Stop. If step is negative, so the start must be greater than stop. If the step is positive, the start must be less than stop. If the step is negative, the start must be greater than what? Stop. So this is a syntax here. So it means once you create a slice object, so that is reusable. So you can apply that. You can apply that slicing to either one sequence or more than one sequence. For example, I create a list, list of range, some 10, 100, 10, 1, 10, 10. So if you see, this is a list one. So the list one is having how many values? 10 values. I try to create another list. So list of, okay, range of some 100, okay, 100, what is that? So 110, 10. Okay. So this is another list which is having again, 110 I said. Okay, list 2 equal to list of range of 100, 2, 10, 10. So this is a list 2, which is having again how many values? 10 values. List 1 is having 10 values, and list 2 is also have 10 values. Okay, see, list 1 have 10 values, and list 2 is also having 10 values. Now I want to do the slicing, equal slicing. Then what you can do is you can just create a slice object. Okay, equal slicing, I want to do both. See, both the list I want to apply one slice. So instead of defining the same slicing again and again, you can just write slice. You can give what is the start. Okay, start is 0. Okay, start is 0 and stop is 5. So then what I'm doing is list 3 equal to list 1 of S1. List 4 equal to list 1 of list 2 of S1. See, what is S1 here? S1 is nothing but slice object. So this slice object, same slice object, right? You're applying to the list 1 as well as what? List 2. See, same slice object you're applying to the list 1 as well as list 2. So you're trying to print list 3 and you're trying to print what here? List 4. So it is reusable. Means once you create a slice object, this object can be applied to one or more than one list. Suppose if any changes in slicing, if any changes in slicing, where you do the changes in slice object. If I do the changes in slice object, same thing is applicable to all the list. So maintaining your application becomes what? Easy. So here slice object is reusable. Okay, slice object is what here? Reusable. Okay, slice object is reusable. Okay, it is reusable. Yes. Yeah, 11 objects. So what is the problem? So what is the problem? 11 objects are having. What is the problem? Because we have given that right. 100 comma 2, 10 comma 10. I said 100 comma 2, 10 comma 10. 11 objects. So what is the problem? So based on the range only it will create, right? Yeah, maybe by mistake I said, but you have to use, if you want middle values, yesterday I said already. Okay, you have to use slice operator. I already said yesterday. Okay, you have to use slice operator if you want to slice middle operator. Okay, right. So that is how you are trying to do slicing. So slicing can be done in two ways. One is using slice operator and one more is using slice object. Okay, right. So you can also read the elements of the list by using iterator. So let us talk about iterator. So, but sometimes they may ask you a question like, what is the difference? What is the difference between indexing and what is that slicing? Sometimes they may ask, what is the difference between indexing and slicing? So here, there's only one difference here. Okay. So generally use index. Okay. To read only one value. Okay. Use slicing to read. Okay. More than what? One value. Only one difference. So slicing uses what is that? Multiple indexes. Okay, to read more than one value. Slicing uses more than one index to read more than one value. Okay, so what is the difference between indexing and slicing? See, you can also read the content of the list or collection using iterator. So we can read the content of any collection using iterator. So generally iterator is used for non can we print rest elements in set part? What is that? Question is what? Can we print rest elements in set apart from what we slice? What is this? I didn't get. So generally iterator is used for non-index based collections. Non-index based collections for reading elements. If it is index based, you can read directly using index. If it is index based, you can read it directly using what? Index. Suppose if it is non-index based, how can you read it? Okay, if it is index based, you can read it directly using index. But if it is non-index based, how can you read it? You read it with the help of which one? Iterate. If it is index, you can read it by using index because list is index based. List is index based, but set is not index based. Okay, list is index based, but set is not index based. Dictionary is not index based. Then how can you read it? You take the help of which one? Iterate. Okay, so iterator is used for non-index based collection for reading what here? Elements. Okay, it can also use to read the elements from any collection, but most of the times you'll use the iterator for which collections? Non-index based collections. For non-index based collections. Okay, so iterator allows to read. Iterator allows to read elements or items or data in forward in forward direction. Iterator allows to read. Using iterator, you can read elements or items or data in which direction? Forward direction. You can read the elements in which direction? Forward direction. So it allows to read it, but doesn't allow to modify. Okay. So iterator is read only. Iterator is read only. Using this, we can read elements. Using this, we can read elements, but we cannot modify or update elements. We can read elements, but we cannot modify or update elements. So that you cannot do it by using which one? Iterator. So that you cannot do it by using which one here? Iterator. So we can read the content of any collection using iterator. So generally iterator is used for non-index based collection and for reading elements. Iterator allows to read elements in forward direction. Iterator is read only. Using this, we can read elements but cannot modify or update the elements, right? Suppose assume that so there is one list. Okay, assume that there is one list and this list is having 5 values. So 40 and 50. Now these are the 5 values which are there in the list here. So how many values are there in the list here? 5 values, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So assume that this is the list object. Okay, now this is a list object. So this list object is having how many values? 5 values. Now 10 to 50. You can see this is the first value. And this is a second value. This is third value. And this is fourth value. Now this is called as which object here? List object. So what is the name of the list? List 1. Now this is a list 1. And you can say these are indexes. 1, 2, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to read the elements from this list. Then I can read it using index. I can read it using index. I can read more than one using slicing. I can read it using index. I can read it more than one using what? Slicing. You can also read it by using iterator. Then ITER, okay, ITER, it followed by what? Iterable. So this function, ITER function returns iterator object. So what is the name of the function you are using? ITER, and on any iterable. So iterable can be any type. So ITER is a function. Iterable means what here? Collection. So this ITER function returns which object here? Iterator object. So it will create iterator on this iterable. Suppose I'm saying x equal to ITER on list 1. So once I write ITER on list 1, what will happen? It will create another object. And this is which object here? Iterator object. So this iterator object hold, you're sending, see, you're sending list 1 address to which one? Iterator function. That iterator function return iterator object. That iterator function receive address of list 1 and return which object? Iterator object. It means iterator object hold address of which one? List. Iterator object hold address of which one? List. Iterator object hold address of which one? List. So it hold the address of list. So using this iterator object, you can read elements from what here? List. So how iterator object can read? It can read it by calling one function here. So it means internal this iterator maintains what is the index. This iterator maintains which one? Index. So this index starts at what? Okay, 0. Index starts at what here? 0. So using this iterator object, you can read the elements from which one? List. But how can I read the elements? By calling, suppose this is x. X is nothing but which object here? Iterator object. How can I read it? By calling the function called next. You're saying next by sending iterator. Next, you are reading next element of which one? Iterator. So what iterator is doing? It is reading one element. It is reading one element using this index. It will read the element using which one? Index. What is the index here? 0. So what is the element at 0 here? 10. And after that, index get incremented with what? 1. If I want to read the next element, If I want to read the next element, I just write here if I want to read the next element, I'm saying next of x, then what will happen? It will read one more element. It will read one more element from the list and return the value. What is that? 20. So whenever you want to read the element, you are calling which function? Next function by sending this iterator object, and that will read the next value. That will read the next value. Next value. So what is the next value here? 30. I cannot say this is the index. Actually, this you can call it as position. Because I said no, this iterator is used for non-index based collections. Here, for your understanding, I've written index, but here you don't have index. Actually, it is called position. Okay. So next, again, if I'm saying next, again, if I'm saying next of x, then it will read the next value. And so that will return the value called which one? 40. If I'm saying again next of x, if I'm saying again next of x, then read the next value. What is the next value here? 50. Okay. So again, if I say next, again, if I say next of x, now this time it generates what here? Error. This time it generates what here? Error. So why? Because is it any more elements to read from the list? No. Is it any more elements to read from the list? No. There's no more elements to read from the list. Then immediately it generates what here? Error. Okay. So it means using one iterator object, you can read the elements how many times? Only one time. Using one iterator object, you can read the elements how many times? Only one time. You can read elements how many times? Only one time. But you cannot read it more than one time. You can read only one time, but you cannot read more than one time. Okay. So by calling next function, next is a predefined function. Next is a predefined. Next is what your predefined function. So this function returns. This function returns next element or item from iterable or next item generated by iterator. But iterator from where it is reading it? Okay, iterator is reading from iterable. Iterator is reading from iterable. I said no, this is very much useful for which collections? Non-index based collections. So this function returns next element or item generated by what? Iterator. Okay. So using one iterator object, we can iterate elements only once. Iterate means read elements only once. We can read elements how many times? Only once, but we cannot read more than one time. Suppose I can write like this file. For example, I create one list. Okay, list of range of 10 comma 1 10 comma 10. So I want to read it. So what I can do is I'm creating iterator iter on list one. Then I can read each value. Value 1 next of x. Okay, value 2 next of x. Value 3 next of x. Okay, then I try to print value 1, value 2, and value 3. Okay, so I try to print value 1, value 2, and one more is what? Value 3. So I try to print number of values. Okay, so once you run this, again see 10, 20, and what? 30. So how many times I call the next function? 3 times. Means it will read how many values from the list? 3 values. But actually list is having how many values? 10 values. Okay, list is having how many values? 10 values, but I read how many values? 3 values. If I want to read 10 values, I have to call next and next and next how many times? 10 times. If 1000 values are there, you have to call next and next and next how many times? 1000 times. So will it that becomes very complex or not? Yes. To avoid that complexity, you can give this. You can give this iterator to the for loop. You can give this. Okay, we can give this iterator to what? For loop. Please, you joined now only, Pranavi. Joined now only. Pranavi, you joined now only or long back? You joined now only. What year? Please read document. If you join now, then read document, right? Okay, read the document. I already said where iterator is used. You want me to explain all this again? Huh? What year? Huh? So for value in, I can write like this. For value in, for value in, what I can do, I can give this iterator to the for loop. I can give this iterator to which one? For loop. If I give this iterator to the for loop, what for loop will do internally? For loop will call internally which function? Next function. Getting on. So you can call next function explicitly. You can call next function explicitly, or if you give this iterator to the for loop calls the next function of this iterator. Then what will happen? Every time it will read one value. Every time it will read one value. Now you can see rest of the values 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. So if number of values are there, you can create iterator and you can give this iterator to what? For loop. So rather than calling next number of times, because suppose if my list is having 1000 values, I cannot call next 1000 times, right? I cannot call next 1000 times. Rather than that, I create iterator and I give that iterator to which loop? For loop. So that the for loop can call the next function to read each value. The for loop calls the next function to read each value. To read each value. For loop uses next function to read each value, right? Suppose, see here. Now these are the values what you're trying to read. Okay. Now not only that, this iterator is not only used. This iterator is not only used for non-index based collection. It is also useful to perform read-only operations, because list is mutable or immutable? Mutable. List is a mutable. And if you want to perform only reading operations, only reading, but should not allow to modify. Now, this is very much useful even when you are working with functions. For example, while working with functions, what will happen is, assume that I have a two functions. So there are two functions are there. Assume that this is one function. If you are working with functions, okay, assume that this is one function and assume that this is one function. Okay, assume that where it is used, one more usage of iterator. One usage is what non-index based collection, and one more usage of this iterator is, assume that you have a two functions. This is one function, and assume that this is another function, and this function is having this function. Actually, this function, there are two functions are there. One is function 1 and function 2. Assume that in application development, assume that I create one list in function 1. I create one list in function 1. I create one list in function 1. If I create one list in function 1, I cannot use that in what function 2. I can use this list 1 in function 1, but I cannot use in what function 2. So within function 1, it will create a list. Within function 1, it will create a list. Now this is a list 1. Okay, this is a list 1. And the list 1 is having address of list. List 1 is having address of list, which is having 5 values, 30, 40, and 50. So list 1 is having the address of list, and this list is having how many values here? 5 values. Okay, assume that address of this list is 1000. So what list 1 is having here? 1000. Okay, what list 1 is having here? 1000. List 1 is having 1000 here. List 1 is having address of list, and this list is having how many values? 5 values. So what will happen if I send this list 1? Suppose function 2 want to use list 1 of function 1, then function 1 will send this list 1 to which one? Function 2. Okay, the function 1, see function 1 is sending list 1 to which one? Function 2. So function 2 will receive this. Assume that in functions, this is when you are working with the functions. Then here in Python, there is no pass by value. In Python, there is no pass by value. So what will happen is, it will not send the list. It will not send the list to function 2, but rather than it will send. It will not send the list to the function 2. It will send which one? Address. What it will send? Address. Address of list 1 is sent to function 1. Now your L is holding the list which is created in what? Function 1. It means list 1 and L both are holding the same list. Okay, list 1 and L both are holding the same list. List 1 and L both are holding the same list. So what will happen here is, if function 2, suppose in function 2, I'll say list L of 0 equal to 100 or L of 0 equal to 99. So L is nothing but list 1 only. List 1, this 10 is modified to which one? 99. This 10 is modified to which one? 99. Okay, it means when you're working with the functions, you'll be passing one list to another. You'll be passing a list from one function to what? Another function. When you pass the list from one function to another function, the other function can able to do changes in what? List. But I don't want the other function should do changes in what? List created in what? Function 1. Then what do you do it? You don't send it. You don't send which one here? List. You don't send which one here? List, because I want function 2 should read it, but it should not modify it. I want the function 2 should read it, but it should not modify it. In that case, you create what here? Iterator. You create iterator on the list 1. It means you are wrapping this list 1. So you create iterator. This is iterator. And this iterator is holding the address of which one? List 1. This iterator is holding the address of list 1. Suppose, assume that address of this iterator is 2000. If I'm saying function 2 by sending x, if I'm saying function 2 by sending x, you're not sending the list. You're not sending the list, but what you're sending here? Iterator. So it means L is no more holding the list address. Okay. Now L is holding address of which one? Iterator. L is holding the address of which one? Iterator. So using this iterator, what this function 2 can do? It can read it, but it cannot do any changes. Using this iterator, function 2 can read it, but cannot do any changes. So if you are working with the functions and if you want to restrict, if you want to restrict the data, if you want to restrict the data not update or modify inside another function, even you can go for which one? Iterators. So it is very much useful in what? Functions. Okay. So you create one mutable object in one function and you want the other function should read it, but it should not perform any other operation. Then you can also use which one? Iterate. So two usages are there. One is for non-index based collections and second one is to perform which operations? Read-only operations in what? Functions. It is used to perform read-only operations inside or in functions while working with functions. But you may learn this again when you move to functions, but just remember this. Okay. So this is iterator. There's one more way of reading the elements from list. And how can you read the elements from the list? You can read it by using which one? Enumerate. There's one more way of reading the elements from the list. And what is that another way of reading is enumerate. But enumerate and iterator both are same. Enumerator and iterator both are same. But enumerate returns. No, it is not indexed, right? If you want to read, that is what I said. Okay. Iterator. I said we can read elements in which direction. Using this, we can read elements. Okay, read elements in which direction? Forward direction. Okay. It is not, you're not using index. How can you read more than one? You're not using index, no. If you're not using anything, how can you read more than one? Using iterator, you can iterate only one value. If you want to iterate more than one value, go for slicing. Okay, right. Enumerate. Cannot do that. Okay, it is only sequential. Iterating is done in sequential, one by one. You cannot read even randomly also. See here, next is a predefined function. This function returns the next element or item generated by iterator. Okay, using one iterator object, we can iterate or read elements only once. Okay, yes. Enumerate. There's one more. See, iterator and enumerator both are same. But only the thing is, enumerate. What enumerate will do is, enumerate return two values. Okay, enumerate. If we see the technical definition of it, enumerate is a built-in function, and this will return enumerator object. Yes, enumerate. So return an enumerate object, enumerate function. Enumerate function returns which object here? Enumerate object. So iterable must be a sequence or an iterator or some other object which supports what here? Iteration. But enumerate function return which object? Enumerate object. And you are creating enumerate object using iterable. And there is also a start. Now start is nothing but, so your start. Yes. Now you can see enumerate returns a tuple. So it returns a tuple. It returns a tuple. Returns tuple containing count. Return tuple containing the count. Return a tuple containing a count from start which defaults to 0. And the values obtained from iterating over what? Iterable. Okay. So return a tuple containing a count from start which defaulted to what? 0. And the values obtained from iterating over iterables. Okay, so this will return two things. One is a value from iterable as well as what? Start. So yeah, the start is nothing but count. Start is nothing but count here. Suppose, how can I get the iterator object? So that is by using enumerate. How can I get the enumerate object? By using enumerate function. By using which function here? Enumerate function. For example, I created one list. For example, I created one list with some values. Okay, I created one list with some values. Now, this is a list having 5 values. Assume that. This is a list having how many values? 5 values. Assume that this is a list having how many values? 5 values. Now I'm creating enumerate object by saying enumerate on list 1. Enumerate on list 1. Then I try to call the next function. So next will return how many values? 2 values. One is the value which is there in the list, and second one is what? Count. Okay, one is the value which is there in the list, and second one is what here? Count. Suppose value 1, value 2, okay, value 1, value 2, value 3, okay, value 3. So how many times I call the next on enumerator? 3 times. Next on enumerate, next on enumerate, next on enumerate. So first value it returns along with the count. Count start from where? 0. And return the next value with the count 1. Return the next value with the count what? 2. Now if you print value 1, value 2 and value 3, you are trying to print value 1, value 2 and value 3. You are trying to print value 1, value 2 and value 3. Now you can see this is a tuple which contain 0 is a count and 10 is a value. 1 is a count and 20 is a value. 2 is a count and 30 is a value. For example, if you want to prepare some charts, you want to prepare a chart. Now I want to use a values. I want to use a values on y-axis, and I can use this count. Count on which axis? X-axis. But list is having only values, right? List is having only values, but I want to return the count. You can define count also. For example, I'm saying E equal to enumerate. E equal to enumerate list 1, comma. I can start the count. Suppose you want to count, you want to start the count from some value. You can define the count from some value. For example, if you want to start the count from some 100, so count is from where? 100. Then I can say v1 equal to next of e. Okay, v2 equal to next of e, and v3 equal to next of e, and then print v1, v2 and one more is v3. This will return. Now you can see the count start from where? 100. Here the count start from where? 0. But here the count start from where? 100. 100 and values 10, 101, values 20, 100, values 10, 101, values 20, 102, values what here? 30. So this you can call it as a count. Okay. So using enumerator is also like iterator only, but this is returning how many values? 2 values. Value generated by iterable, and one more is which one? Start. But what is the default start here? 0. Yes. What is the default start here? 0. Okay. Yes. Now these are, as I know, these are again useful for non-index based collections. Non-index based collections, enumerator as well as what? Iterator. Enumerator as well as what? Iterator. Okay. Yes. So you can also read it directly using a for loop. You can read the elements directly using which one? For loop. If you want to read, suppose index, using index, you can read sequentially as well as what? Randomly. Using index, you can read sequentially as well as what? Randomly. And using slicing, you can read more than one value. If you want to read more than one value, go for what? Slicing. Iterator is to read. If you want to read it for non-index based collections, and when you are working with the functions, okay, then you go for which one? Iterator. Iterator reads in forward direction only in which order? Sequential order. Enumerate also iterator, but it returns how many values? 2 values. One is a value and one more is a count. And you can also use a for loop. Okay, see, using iterator, you can iterate each time one value, but using for loop, you can iterate all the values. If you want to read all the values and perform certain operation, then you can go for which one? For loop. So for loop. So for loop also use. For loop also used to read elements from iterables. Okay. So what will happen is for loop, internally for loop internally creates for loop internally creates for loop internally creates an iterator object. For loop internally creates iterator object and iterate iterate or read iterate or read elements iterate or read elements. For loop internally creates an iterator object and iterate or read what elements. So that is what you mean by implicit iterator. That is what is an implicit iterator. Implicit iterator. Okay. Suppose assume that you can read directly values using for loop. Suppose I create a list with a range of some 1 comma 101. So how many values are there in the list here? 100 values. How many values are there in the list here? 100 values. 100 values are there in the list. That is from 1 to 100. I want to read each time one value. I can write directly for value in list 1. I can say directly for value in what here? List 1. But when you write for value in list 1, what internally for loop is doing? It is create one iterator on list 1. It create one iterator on list 1 and then call which function? Next function. Internally, it will not directly read from the list 1. What internally this for loop is doing is, it is creating iterator on list 1 and then reading it by invoking which function? Next function. Reading it by invoking which function? Next function. Okay. So I try to print all the values here. Now these are number of values. Now you can see all the values read from list. You can directly give this value to the list. You can directly give this value to the list. Okay, right now that you can do it by using which one? For loop. See, for loop, you can use a for loop only for reading. You can use a for loop only for reading, but you cannot modify it, right? Using for loop, you are reading it. See, what you are doing using for loop? You are reading element. You are reading element from list. After reading element from list, you are using that value inside a for loop. What is used inside the for loop? Value. Is it list is used inside a for loop or values used inside for loop? Value. It means you can perform which operations? Read only. See, this for loop each time it is reading value. And which one is used inside a for loop? Is it list 1 is used inside a for loop or value of list 1 is used in for loop? Value of list is used inside for loop. If you want to do any changes, right, you have to take the help of index. You have to take the help of index. You are not using list inside the for loop. You are using value inside the for loop. So it means you are just reading it. Using for loop, you are just reading it. You are just reading it. That is what iterator, right? Iterator is what? Read only. Iterator is a read only. Okay. Yes. You can print all the values here. But so many values are there. We'll take 10 values and we'll try to print in the same line like this. Okay. This is how you create a list and how you read elements from the list. This is how you create a list and how you read the elements from which one list, right? So different approaches are there to read the elements from iterable. Different approaches are there to read the elements from iterable. Let us see. Yes. So I said list. List is a mutable collection. Mutable. List is what here? Mutable. After creating list, we can add, update, and remove data. Okay, after creating list, we can add, update, and remove data. Data or elements. This terminology, elements, items, all these are one and the same. List is a mutable collection, and after creating, we can add, update, and remove data. Elements are what is that? Items. But how can we do this? Okay. Now for that, Python provides some mutable operations or mutable functions. Python provides mutable functions. So there is the function called append. There's a function called which one? Append. Append it followed by element. Element, value, all these are one and the same. So this function add the element at the end of list. If you want to add the element at the end of the list, you take the help of which function here? Append. Okay, using append, we can add only one element. Using append, you can add only one element, but you cannot add more than one element. Okay, using append, you can add only one element, not more than one. If you want to append more than one element, we'll see that how you can do it by using slicing. We'll see that. But append is there. For example, if the question is asked like this, okay, dynamic. If you want to do changes dynamically, write a program to read the scores of n players and display. I want to read the scores of how many players here? N players. And then I want to display all the scores. So where you are trying to read this scores, you are reading the scores inside one list. So this is which list? This is empty list or not? Yes. This is empty list. Okay, what is this list here? Empty list. This is an empty list. What is this list here? Empty list. Empty list it is. Okay, right? Now this is a list, but this list is what here? Empty. This list is empty here. Now I want to add values. How can I add the values? I want to add the values at runtime, not in the program. I can give values here, but this is not dynamic, right? You're directly giving values inside the list. Okay. But I don't want to give the values inside the list here. But I want to give the values at what? Runtime. After creating list, I want to add the values. For example, see, I created one empty list. Okay. I created one empty list. List one is what here? Empty. I want to add values. Okay, I want to add values. How can I add it? List one dot append. List one dot append 10. List one dot append. What is this? 20. List one dot append. What is this here? 30. But we created list empty. But we try to add how many values after creation? 3 values. So print list one. I want to append one more value. I can say list one dot append 40. I want to add one more value. I'm saying list one dot append 50. Then I try to print list one. Now list one is having how many values? 5 values. Means after creating a list, if you want to add the values, you can add the values using which method? Append method. Okay. Yes, after creating. After creating, if you want to add the values, you can add the values using append. Okay, now this is empty list. This is what your empty list. And after creating empty list, you can add the values by using which one here? Append. So append it followed by what here? Element. The element which you want to add it. Now if you see this example, write a program to read the scores of how many players and players and display. Suppose, yes, append gather, append అంట. append అంటే 3 యాడ్ అవుతాయి. కరెక్టే. append what year? Okay, already I've written here. This function add the element at the end of the list. I said using append, you can add only one element, I said. Yes or no? I have to write here. Using append, we can add only one element, or what is that? Item. Okay, now. Append, you want to add 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. What happened? Take exactly one value. Argument means one value. It takes how many values? Only one value. So it is given error or not? Yes. Okay. So I want to read how many scores here? N players. N equal to integer of input. How many players? You want to read the scores of how many players? Okay. Then for I have to add how many players details? N players. Then I have to execute this for loop how many times? N times. Some for I in range of N. Suppose the value of N is 5. Then this for loop generate how many values? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Means how many times this for loop is executed? 5 times. Then I need to read each time one score. Integer of input. Enter score. You're trying to read the score. And this score, you're trying to add to which one? Scores. Scores dot append score. You're reading the score and you're adding that score into what? Scores. You're reading the score and you're adding that score into what here? Scores. Then print scores. I want to find total scores, sum of scores. I want to find maximum score, max of scores. I want to find minimum score. I can say minimum of scores. What is this sum, max, min? All these are functions. Okay, now this is scores list. Okay, scores list. I just print scores. And this is total score. Okay, total score. I print the total score by using sum function. Then maximum score. Maximum score. I print the maximum score. Then what here? Minimum score. Then minimum score. So I print what here? Minimum score. Okay, now this is my program. So how many players? Some 5 players, some 50, some 60 and 30, 10, okay, and 45. Now you can see this is a total score. This is a list of scores and this is total score and this is a maximum score and this is a minimum score. But how you find the maximum and minimum? By using maximum function and one more is what? Minimum function. And if you want to add this, you are using which function? Sum. So you don't require to write the logic for finding maximum, minimum and sum. You can directly use some predefined functions here. You can directly use predefined functions. So you try to add how many scores here? N scores. You're trying to add how many scores into the list? N scores. Yes. So if you want to add during runtime, you can add during runtime by using which method? Append. But using append, you can add only one value, but you cannot add more than one value. You can add only one value, but you cannot add more than one value. Okay. Yes, we'll see more on this, like how to work with this mutable operations, but tomorrow we'll see it, right? So today we'll stop it here and tomorrow we'll continue this, right? Thank you.